My name is Neil Wattier. I'm a resilience trainer and performance consultant. And the workshop that we're going to be going through today is about stress education, resilience training, and performance optimization. The workbook does have, there's some of it is notes for you to take. Other places are some sentences with some words removed, and it's just kind of a prompt to help you look for the material as we're going through it. It's a little trick that I picked up from John Maxwell workshops. So as we go through this material, I hope that you get something from it, but at the same time, really selected my audience based on who can give me some really good feedback. So I know that you guys are really good at what you do, and there's a lot of similarity between what you do and what I do, and I'm looking for some really good critical feedback of how this can be better. So nothing is off the table, and I'll be providing a link so you can do an assessment, a survey for the workshop a little bit later. So working on science of optimal performance. I like the idea of science because I like everything to be. I don't want to talk necessarily theory. I want to know this is the stuff that's been researched. This is what works, and this is what you can do to implement this in your life or for your clients. And there's the three areas that I focus on is awareness, control, and attention. And notice I said your awareness, your control, and your attention, because you can't be resilient for others and others can't be resilient for you. Your control and your attention, your awareness, your control, your attention, these are things that you know that you're not going to improve and by focusing on other people. You have to focus on yourself. So if you want to improve your relationships, your job performance, even your team performance starts with improving you. So don't be focusing on other people. Look at yourself. Awareness, the state of knowing something. So we're going to talk about stress. We're going to talk about the brain-body connection. For control is your ability to regulate your emotions, your desires, and how you express them. And we're going to look at that in the idea of self-talk, emotional control, and breathing. And the control is really important because that's where we're going to talk about skills. And then the final part is attention, is where are you fixing your mind? Are you listening effectively? Are you watching effectively? Are you careful in how you think about the way that you act or react? We're going to be talking about gratitude and simulation, but there's a lot of skills that you can use in these areas. So the first thing is the purpose of the workshop is to train you to live more intentionally. So the first thing I want you to do, looking at your workbook, is what do you do by default? What are your automatic actions? And we got a relatively small group, so feel free to speak up if you want to. We also have the chat option if you want to use that. But what I want to know is what do you do by default? What are your automatic actions? Your physical actions, your body processes, survival mechanisms, habits, routines. What are the things that you do by default? What are some of the things that come to mind?
Something that comes to my mind is waking up and falling asleep. And along with that, I've realized in past days and months, I would say, that whenever I'm working late and I feel tired, I have a strong tendency to just close the laptop and go sleep.
Just go to sleep.
That seems to be very default to me.
Okay, got it. You can talk about. I like to use the example of breathing. When we were born, after the initial struggle of going from the womb to life outside the body, is you start breathing, and nobody has to train you to do that. From the moment you start breathing, it's a natural body process. your heartbeat, your blood pressure. There's a lot of things that we do. You talked about your nighttime routine. Some people have a morning routine. There's a lot of things that we do by default. We just naturally do them. It's automatic. I also want you to think about which of these can you take conscious control. So, what are some automatic or default processes that we typically leave to default, but we can actually be more we can be more deliberate about them? And we already talked about breathing. Can you take conscious control of your breathing even though it's an automatic process? Okay. Yes. What about your heartbeat, your heart rate? Can you take conscious control of your heart rate?
In a well, I'm gonna go with yes on that actually, and it makes me think about through, for example, breathing. You can vary your heart rate through deliberate actions.
Sure. And I'm not talking about taking 100% control. I'm talking about taking action to influence.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you can take conscious control of an automatic process. So, people talk about, well, I'm going to use breathing to slow down. Well, what about speed up? All I got to do is to increase my heart rate is go down the hall and run. I could drop and do push-ups right now and my heart rate's going to jump up. Yes, I can consciously control an automatic process. So we're going to be talking a lot about the different types of things that we do, the different habits, survival mechanisms, and automatic responses that by taking more deliberate control, you are going to improve your resilience and you're going to increase your optimal performance. So back to the workbook, I want you to move from default to deliberate. Everything in your life that you do by default, I want you to consider what's the benefit of taking more positive control. The idea of performance psychology is very unique from clinical psychology. And I like to make this different. I like to make this make sure you understand the difference early, because I am not a clinical psychologist. I don't work with individuals on trauma. I rarely go into the past and talk about trauma or difficulties. What I look at as a performance psychologist, as a performance consultant, is what's going on in your life right now and how can we optimize your performance? How can we help you to get better in whatever it is that you're trying to accomplish? We want to develop, enhance, maintain performance in a variety of areas of your life because everyone performs. So we look at performance psychology, we might even think of sports psychology. People think about athletes. Some people might even think about military or law enforcement. Well, what about business? What about the performing arts? So there's a lot of areas that you perform in your life. And I would even go as far as to say, well, what about relationships and parenting? There's a performance aspect associated with your relationships, with your parenting. And we're going to be talking about a lot of the different areas that you can take positive control of your life. In the workbook, it gives you an opportunity on page 4 to actually put some of this stuff down. So think about what are the areas of your life that you could benefit or you would like to benefit from increased performance. When we start talking about resilience, first thing we're going to talk about is awareness, because you can't effectively regulate until you're aware, because you don't really know what you're supposed to be regulating or controlling. So it's a lot of what we're going to talk about is awareness. So what are the different areas of your life that you would like to benefit from increased performance? And drawn on science-based principles of the human mind and the body, that's a great way to start because you already have everything that you need. Between the mind and the body, you have everything that you need. It's just a matter of teaching you how to use it a little bit better. So resilience. Think of 3 or 4 words that capture your idea of resilience. You can type them in the chat. You can say them out loud, but what do you think of? What are the strengths, skills, abilities necessary? How do you define resilience and what does it mean? Why is it so important?
I think you adapting well to any situation.
That's pretty good.
Overcoming.
Overcoming. Yep. Overcoming. And I like the idea of, you didn't just say adapting, but you said adapting well. And I think that's a really good differentiator, because I think of sometimes the idea of what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. I actually really, really dislike that saying, because it's absolutely untrue. What doesn't kill you might not make you stronger. It might actually make you weaker. It might reinforce bad behaviors or counterproductive behaviors. So yeah, it's the idea of adapting well, overcoming, growing, right? It's the idea of constant growth and overcoming. Here's some of the things that come to mind when I think about resilience. And I think this is really important because, number one, it's skills that help you grow and thrive. Resilience is not a trait. It's not a character trait. It's not biological. Some people tend to do it a little bit better than others, and that's just like anything else. But looking at resilience as skills helps you understand and empowers you to know that you can do these things better. You can learn, you can train to get better, but there's the trick. It's about training. You have to learn them, because if you don't learn them, in the military, we have a saying that you don't rise to the occasion, you fall to your level of training. So when you get into the thick of a bad day, you're probably going to fall back on whatever your old habits are. So are your old habits productive, or are they counterproductive? If they're counterproductive, you need to relearn them, and you really need to be studying this and practicing it, because you're not going to get any better at it. So, skill-based workshop. My promise to you is that you're going to leave with knowledge and skills that you can immediately implement in your life to make you more aware, have better control, focus your attention so you can be more resilient, mentally strong, and emotionally connected. I want this to be interactive. I don't want it to be 2 hours of me just up here talking. So I'm going to try to make it as interactive as I can. If you want to type it something in the chat, I can see that. So that's interactive. It's a small enough group also that if you want to pop off on the microphone and say something, please feel free to do that. I want this to be interactive. It's a small enough group and we can do that. I also want it to be meaningful and relevant to you. So I want to hear that feedback so I can understand what it means to you and how would you use this. You have the participant feedback, and I'm going to provide you a link in a little bit to make sure that you have the ability to provide some feedback, because that's what I'm looking for. So let's go. Let's do it. So science of optimal performance, we're talking about awareness, control, and attention. So awareness, first we're going to talk about stress, and then we're going to talk about the brain-body connection. And in the brain-body connection, we're going to get into some fancy terms, but it's really, really important. So just a little heads up. So let's first talk about stress. When you hear the word stress, what do you think of? What's the first thing that comes to mind when you hear stress?
Overwhelmed.
Overwhelmed. What else?
Panic.
Panic.
Under pressure.
Under pressure. Okay. Brian says something bad. All right.
Alcohol.
Okay. So substance, or the adaptation or use of something to help you make your way through it. Okay. So there's a couple things about stress. Number one, there's not just bad stress. Bad stress is unhelpful. We call it distress. It's probably a significant cause of anxiety. It can be short-term, but it can also last a long period of time. Probably unpleasant, will decrease your performance over time. And it's the idea of, yeah, this sucks. This is horrible. But you also have the idea of eustress. And eustress is good. It's necessary for overall well-being. It's exciting. Life events, graduating, birth of a baby, getting a promotion, competition is stressful, but it's a good positive stress. Now, looking at distress, excessive prolonged stress is the root of modern disease, because excessive distress it has an inflammatory response to it. So you have to be careful how you feed that inflammatory response. There's physical stress, there's mental, emotional. The food that you eat has a big impact. So when I'm thinking about excessive distress, there's a lot of things that you can be doing that feeds into that counterproductive inflammatory response. Lack of rest. It's not always what you do, it's what you're missing out on. You might just not be resting quite so well. You may not be sleeping as well or sleeping as much. Nutrition. So mention the substance abuse. It's an inflammatory response. And even if you're not feeling stress, those type of actions are going to aid too. And we're going to get into that in a little bit. But the idea of eustress, a lot of people think of the bad side of stress. Not all stress is bad. On a long period of time, though, all stress will have a negative effect. So even the good side, you have to have balance. So the choice in life of what you do, where your control lies in, you have to balance performance and recovery. Recovery is the foundation of performance. We talked a little bit about anxiety. Anxiety is a natural response to stress. It's not always bad, though. Anxiety can be productive or counterproductive. The difference is how you use anxiety. And again, going back to the differentiator between clinical and performance, I'm not talking about clinical anxiety. Get into, like clinical depression, those kind of things. That is a clinical psychologist perspective. And that's not what we're talking about here. When I talk about anxiety, I'm talking about the natural response to stress. Right now, I'm presenting in front of a group of people. I got some butterflies in my stomach right now. That's a good stress because I'm doing what I love. I'm talking to people that I know, and I'm having a good time. But there's still some stress involved. So you just need to understand that the natural order is not necessarily the what's the words I'm looking for? The natural automatic response doesn't always have to be counterproductive or bad. So using what you have, anxiety is natural, use it to your advantage. So when we get into the mind and the body, the brain wants to take shortcuts. And this is important to understand because you have 5 senses, and your 5 senses pull in way more data than your brain can effectively process, store, and recall. So it wants to take shortcuts because it has to simplify the information, right? And that's where you get your automatic default actions, because it has to prioritize. So we go back to think about the automatic the things that you do automatically. This morning, somebody talked about, well, in the morning, I tie my shoes and I don't have to think about it. I can be on the phone, I can be drinking coffee, talking to my kids, talking to my spouse, tying my shoes. I don't even have to think about it. True. But think about it this way. So you tie your shoes. Anybody ever have to tie your shoes 3 or 4 times during the day? Yeah. It could be the shoelaces, but it also could be you, right? Because maybe I'm just not mindful. I'm not paying enough attention to the automatic process. Do you know how many muscles it takes to tie your shoes? Anybody have an idea? Take a wild guess. How many muscles does it take to tie your shoes?
36.
Matt says 36. Brian says 80. Well, we're gonna almost split the difference. We're gonna call it 61. 61 muscles to tie your shoes. And chances are that's an automatic process. You don't have to think about it. That doesn't mean you shouldn't think about it though. All right. And then apply that to any other process that you do, brushing your teeth. All right. Coming home from work after a bad day or rough traffic, right? What's your automatic response? Maybe your automatic response is not the best one. Maybe your automatic process is not the best one. So think more about those automatic processes. Problems can occur when you create unhelpful shortcuts. So not all shortcuts are bad. Not all habits are bad, right? Because your brain has to create shortcuts. But you commonly repeat, and this is in your workbook, you commonly repeat what you commonly do. Whatever you do, you get better at. That's your brain's way of adapting to an overload of information. It wants to create shortcuts. What your job to do is to figure out which ones are good, which ones are bad, which ones are helpful and unhelpful. So in order to reprogram the unhelpful shortcuts, you have to train helpful actions. So again, going back to what doesn't kill you might make you weaker, right? So always the idea, and you're going to hear me saying it over and over throughout the workshop, the idea is to move from default to deliberate. So there you go. Default to deliberate. So let's talk a little bit about the brain-body connection. This is going to be a little bit technical, but it's really important. So the Air Force, we call this the 30,000-foot view. We're going to try to keep this as simple as possible and try to get the right information across to you. But what we're talking about is neurophysiology, which is the study of the nervous system. And some fancy words like neuroplasticity. That just means that the brain changes and grows and can reorganize itself. The brain is always mapping. So we go back to the 61 muscles to tie your shoes. How long did it take you to learn how to do that automatically? Probably a while. If you think, well, we got a couple of young children in the house learning how to tie their shoes as they were, almost late for school this morning because he was trying to tie his shoe 3 or 4 times, right? Now I can do it automatically. The different areas of the brain that I want you to have a very basic understanding of. If you take your hand and you put it on the back of your head, right below your skull, you're going to feel a soft spot. That's your brain stem. The basic idea of the brain stem is your instinctual survival mechanisms. So your heart rate, your blood, your breathing, all those things that your body needs to do, but it doesn't want you to think about it because you need to worry about putting your left foot in front of your right foot, instead of worrying about breathing and your heart rate. Okay. So that's your brain stem. Sorry, I'm going the wrong way. Right about the middle of the brain, the midbrain. So if you put your hands on the side of your head, right about just above your ears, this is your midbrain. This is the area that you connect. It's where a lot of your emotions come from. The limbic system and the amygdala, fancy words. We'll get to those in just a second, but basic emotions, right? This is also where your fight or flight comes from, which is going to be very important. We'll talk about that in a second. The last part, the upper brain, what's called the neocortex, which is way up here on top. It's the maze-looking, spaghetti-looking part of your brain. This is where your attention, thought, memory, and your rational thought is going to come from. I like to put it in here as the filing cabinet just to show my age. It's actually a server. So when we talk about stress response, pulling all this fancy knowledge together that you now have, it's important to understand the amygdala. We're going to talk about the amygdala a little bit. The amygdala in your workbook, page 7, is your rapid response team. This is what fires when you are triggered. And by trigger, I mean you're in traffic and somebody cuts you off. Now I'm mad, right? I was triggered. You get into an argument with someone. It's the same old argument over again that you've heard 30 times, and instantly you get into that argument mode, saying the same things that you've said every other 30 times that you've had your argument. So it fires when you're triggered. It might be appropriate and productive, but it also might be inappropriate and counterproductive. Again, you have to figure out what that is. The brain, this is where it gets into you get into some real trouble. The brain can't tell the difference between real and perceived threat. So think about that for a second. Your brain can't tell the difference between real and perceived threat. So think about, okay, let's put that into something that's not quite so bad. A roller coaster or a haunted house. Anybody like haunted houses? I don't. I'm not all about getting startled. Had bad experiences. But some people like walking through haunted houses and being startled. It's exciting for them. It's exciting and your heart races, even though you know it's fake. You know it's some 13-year-old kid with paint on his face running around with a fake chainsaw. But something about that gets your heart racing and you get that rush, right? Because your brain can't tell the difference between real and perceived threat. Many people run around in a constant high stress environment. They are in a constant state of alert. And many people, it's self-imposed. Whether you're talking about work and your deadlines, and I got to get to work, or I got to stay late, pushing kids into sports or activities, trying to keep up with the Joneses, whatever it is, there's this ideal that people think they immortalize the idea that being in this constant state of stress is the way things are supposed to be. But going back to what we talked earlier, it leads to chronic stress and inflammation, even without the alcohol, without the drugs, without the bad nutrition. The stress alone will cause significant illness. And that could even not in certain things that you don't think about as bad, about pleasure and sensuality. That comes from the same area, because it's that immediate response. It's that immediate want and need. So the stress response, it's important to understand it's triggered by the amygdala. So I want to talk a little bit about sensory cues. So sensory cues are important because they come from your subconscious as well. So think about smells. Think about your favorite smell from when you were a child. Mine was my mom's banana bread. I always knew when she was cooking up some yummy bread. It tasted as well as it smelled. So think about your smells from your childhood. There's a lot of emotions that are tied to smell, and smell is one of our strongest senses because the distance from your nose to that sensory area is the shortest distance than any other sensory nerve. So smell is extremely powerful and extremely important. They've even shown that like Alzheimer's patients, memory loss patients will have sensory cues from their smells that never go away. So it's extremely powerful. But it can also be a bad experience. People have reported coming back from combat zones and smelling things. They'll smell something off in the distance that'll trigger something from their past. What about sounds? Think about, maybe somebody driving to work hears a siren versus an off-duty police officer hears a siren. You're probably going to get significantly different emotional responses from those sounds. What about images, colors, patterns? Faces is a huge one right now because we pull in so much information from nonverbal communication. But if you can't see my face, your body registers that as an instant threat because you can't read my nonverbals out of my face. other than maybe my eyes up here. The rest of this is lost. So as we walk around in mass, you need to be aware that whether you realize it or not, your body is under a constant state of threat because it can't read nonverbals from other people. What other sensations? Taste, feeling. What's it like to lay in a hammock or sit in a camp chair and feel a cool breeze? How does your body respond? And again, the difference between performance psychology and clinical psychology is I don't need to go into your past to talk about this. All I need you to do is be aware of what your body is doing now. What are the responses that you're having to smells, to sounds, to sight, taste, or feel? Remember that your brain and your body records everything, but it does not productively process everything. And the response can be explosive. So let's talk about emotional control. So talking about the brain-body connection, all that stuff that we just talked about with the brain specifically, again, that's a very top of the surface conversation. But the important things to remember, your amygdala fires and your neocortex your neocortex is responsible for rational thought. Now, here's where we're going to tie those things together. UCLA did a study. They hooked people up to brain scan machines, and they showed them pictures. The pictures were very, very disturbing images. And what they realized was as they were showing them these images, first of all, the amygdala fired in 1/25th of a second. So in a snap of your fingers, your body was already responding. The other thing they realized is when the amygdala fires, it requires glucose, and it pulls the glucose, the sugars, from the neocortex. So not only does your amygdala fire very quickly, but it fires very, very strong. So you're emotionally reacting to something and shutting down your logic. So when we say the word trigger, that's why that word is so powerful, because you are actually emotionally responding and you're incapable of thinking logically. Now, they did the research again, and this time when they showed them the image, all they asked them to do was say one word per image. What's the emotion that you're feeling? And the dramatic change where the glucose was then thrust back into the neocortex, because in order to think logically, your brain has to change its pattern. And just by identifying, I'm sad, I'm disturbed, I'm upset, you are now able to effectively logically think. So they came up with a technique called name it and tame it. So there you go. There's one of your first skills, hard skill that you got to take. Name it and tame it. If you name the emotion, you are more likely to be able to logically think through the reactions of what's happening to you. And I saw this recently as an example with her 6-year-old. He was sitting down on the couch and told us this story about a week or two ago. He was riding around with his grandma and grandpa, and they were going to go to one of the light shows that they had built up. It was one of the drive-through light shows. Well, as they were out and about getting ready to go out to the show, he's sitting in the car and they realize the power went out and the show's not available. So he, of course, was upset and started having a conversation with his grandparents where he said, you know, I'm really upset right now. I'm really mad. And he was telling us about this conversation he had with his grandparents and how just by talking about the emotion, he was able to stop being upset, stop crying, and have a logical conversation with his grandparents about why he was upset. At 6 years old, I was blown away. I love it. I think it's amazing. So something for you, when you have conflict, just say it out loud. You know, I have a friend of mine who's he teaches with me the resilience programs, old school special forces guy, and he has a relationship with his wife where He'll actually just say, I'm having upset feelings. And it sounds so ludicrous, but he's actually 100% serious when he says that. And it's 100% effective that he does. All he has to do is say, I'm having upset feelings. So there you go. So emotional control. Going back to the automatic systems of the body, the autonomic nervous system is hardwired. And there's two areas that I want you to be aware of. One is the parasympathetic. And what I want you to think about is parachute. It slows you down. Parasympathetic helps you slow down. This is your rest and digest, stores energy, sleep, recovery, mindfulness. All right. And then there's the other side is the sympathetic. It speeds you up. This is your fight or flight response. It's explosive and it expends energy. If we are constantly in a sympathetic imbalance, you will expend more energy than you recover because you're not effectively recovering and resting. Sympathetic imbalance can end up with things like people that are sympathetic imbalance can end up with high cortisol, low testosterone, high irritability, immunity issues, and chronic disease because you're constantly in a state of threat. So you have to learn to live balanced. So fight or flight, it's explosive. Many of us live in a constant state of threat, this chronic stress response posture. So even if you don't feel threat, the fact that we're sculpted by experiences and we have tight muscles and we have this natural internal curl, just being in this position, your body's going to respond with aggression, agitation, defense. It's going to be sympathetically imbalanced just by sitting. And this position right here, computers, phones, driving, shooting, whatever it is, anything that gets you to curl inward is encouraging the sympathetic response. So what I want you to do right now, wherever you're at, just stand or sit up straight. I want you to stick your chest out. I want your hands shoulder level. All I want you to do is I want you to reach back as far as you can and inhale, look up. And then exhale. That alone, that small step will bring your sympathetic nervous system to a screeching halt, and it will put you more into the relaxed recovery state. So it's the little things. We're going to talk more about breath here in a little bit. But I have, as we finish up awareness, I have one little exercise for you. So on your workbook, page 9, there's a circle. What I want you to do, on the inside of the circle, I want you to think about words or phrases associated with eustress, with good stress, things that are within your control, where you can put your time, attention, where can you be mindful of things that are good for you, things that are within your control, inside the circle. And then on the outside of the circle, I want you to put the things that are stressful, the de-stress, outside your control. What are the things that are outside of your control? What are the things that cause you distress? What does it feel like to be distressed? Write those things outside the circle. And this is a really good drill to help keep you mindful of where you should put your focus. That is all we have on awareness. Now, before I move on, we start talking about control. I want to hear your thoughts, concerns, ideas, where you see this fitting into your life, how you see yourself using this information. We're talking about awareness.
So I think being a cop in the military, we're constantly go, 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 go all the time, making split second decisions. And, I find myself a lot of times making those decisions in a split second that don't need to be made in a split second. So maybe taking time, sit back, take a deep breath, soak everything in, and just go from there, so I can make a conscious decision that maybe better suits the situation.
Well, and you also have to, you have the visibility of, in normal calm circumstances, but even now, with the heightened tensions, you have the added stress of you have to be under control at all times because you're under such a tight microscope. People are always watching you. Another thing that got brought up, and I won't go into detail, but another skill that they were teaching security forces members and police officers was me calm, you calm. And it's the idea of don't elevate your emotions and your reactions to match other people. You have to keep yourselves calm regardless of how they're reacting. And if you do that, you have the potential to reduce their stress level simply by being calm yourself in a difficult situation. So, I think that can be really trying for your type of career field where, you have to make decisions, and it feels like you have to make those decisions all the time. Sometimes you don't. You use the example of, what's the first thing a first responder is taught when they come upon a scene? What are they supposed to do? And most people that aren't first responders, they don't know. So what's the first thing? And it's a lot of times they're taught what is it, scene safe, right? You have to assess the scene, and part of assessing the scene is assessing yourself. So you imagine a first responder coming upon a scene, the worst scene imaginable, and the first thing they're taught to do is to pause and take a breath and assess the scene. That's got to be really difficult to do, but it's absolutely necessary. So, and I think that's applicable in a lot of things that we do. How many decisions do I make that I have to make right now? Probably very few. But if I put that pressure on myself, now I've got that self-imposed chronic stress response because I'm putting all this pressure on myself. It's unnecessary. All right. So I do want to make sure that if we need a break, because we're going for 2 hours, and I know 2 hours can be a lot, right? And we're pushing about 30-ish minutes right now. So I'm going to go 10 more. And if everybody wants to take a breather, we can certainly do that. But I want to at least get started on talking about control. We're talking about self-talk, and we're talking about breathing. These are active techniques that you can use to not only have mental and emotional impacts, but also significant physical impacts on your body. So self-talk. What's self-talk? What do you think self-talk is?
Messages that I'm telling myself.
Yep. Whatever you say to yourself. It's your internal dialogue. There you go. Thanks, Brian. Yeah, it's your internal monologue. It's things that you say to yourself. Things happen in your life, right? You think about the actions that you take, and many of us, and myself included, like to imagine I'm in control of all the things that I do. But think about how many actions do you take versus how many reactions do you take? We react a lot more than we give ourselves credit for. There's a significant problem when you jump from event or action to emotion. So I'm driving in traffic and somebody cuts me off. Why are you so mad? Well, the traffic was so horrible. Nope, that's not how it works. You are not upset because traffic was bad. You told yourself something about the traffic being bad, and that caused you to be upset. Events do not determine your emotions and your reactions. That's a victim mentality. Oh, I'm upset because they treated me bad. So they treated you bad. Fact. Separate, and that's going to be the biggest thing over the next couple of minutes as we talk about self-talk. Separate the event from your thoughts, from your emotions. because the event does not cause your emotion. That's a victim mentality. Your emotions and your reactions are driven 100% by your thoughts. That's empowerment and that's accountability. So you talk about, I want to be calm, or you talk about, I want to have a productive end to this argument that I'm having. You need to focus on your thoughts, because that is what is driving your emotions. And this is what it looks like. So you have an activating event. In your workbook, we call this keyword trigger. We already talked a lot about triggers, right? It's an event that happens. It's a challenge. It's an adversity. It might even be a good thing, because positive events are still stressful, right? Getting married, getting a promotion, moving to a new location, moving a job. Those are all good things, but they're still stressful. And then you have thoughts. This is your interpretation of the event. It's what you tell yourself in the heat of the moment. I'm not talking about a 10-minute dialogue. I'm talking about, I get caught up in traffic, asshole. It's the first thing that pops into your mind. That's your heat of the moment thought. And then as a result of your thoughts, there are consequences in the form of your emotions and your physical reactions. And remember, heat of the moment thoughts, you have to separate your thoughts from the emotion and reaction. So I want to put this into a couple of real life scenarios. So let's say you're having an argument with someone that you care about. And the first thing that pops into your mind is, they never listen to what I have to say. What kind of emotions does that drive?
Frustration.
Frustration. Anger. I came up with frustrated, irritated, or angry, because they just never listen to what I have to say. Yeah, disappointment. Right? What kind of physical reactions would you think your body you would go through by feeling frustrated, irritated, or angry? What are some physical reactions to being angry? What are those automatic responses?
Throwing stuff.
Yeah, there you go. Could throw something, could hit somebody or something. I'm thinking maybe like a physical response. My heart's racing. If I'm really upset, my heart's racing. I'm probably tense, maybe even sweating. My hands are clammy, right? Those are all physical responses to emotion. Emotions are responses to your thoughts. What about preparing for an event? So you're preparing to take a test. And I'm talking about not like just a driver's test, but like computer programming, nursing, psychology, something where the test is going to determine your ability to do your job. It's pretty stressful. And suddenly you start feeling nervous and anxious. Your heart's racing, you're tense. Now, knowing the model, the test, preparing to take the test does not make you nervous. What are you telling yourself?
You're imagining or telling yourself that you're not going to do well.
There you go.
Stuff like that.
Yeah. That's exactly what I was thinking when I put it in there. What if I fail? That thought is driving your nervous, anxious, heart racing tension. Preparing for a test does not cause you to be anxious. You're telling yourself something. Okay. Every thought that you have drives an emotion. Every thought. It might be insignificant, but every thought that you have. So this goes back to your brain mapping. You need to be aware of your thoughts. Because, yeah, if I come home from a bad day, at work or got stuck in traffic, and I come home and I yell at my spouse once, maybe it's not a big deal, but I start doing that 2 or 3 times, 4 times, I'm now telling my brain, and my brain is mapping, after a bad day at work, it's okay to come home and yell at my spouse. I am creating that habit. Emotions are accompanied by physiological and behavioral changes, right? So I'm going to do a quick drill with you guys. I'm going to give you 3 minutes. And just for fun, Brian, I'm going to have you be my writer. You got a piece of paper and a pencil? Okay, good. All right. So I want you guys to unmute. I'm going to have you work together as a group. And I'm going to give you a couple minutes. These are your instructions. I want you to, and I'm going to stop sharing so you guys can see each other better. There you go. Okay. Here's the drill. Brian's got a piece of paper. I want you to draw a line down the middle of the paper. On one side, I want you to write positive. On the other side, I want you to write negative. All right. You guys have 3 minutes. As a team, I want you to come up with as many emotions as you can. And then write them either positive or negative. Go. I'll be back in 3
Happy.
minutes.
Sad.
Angry.
Frustrated.
I heard frustrated. What else?
Angry.
Got it.
Excited.
Okay.
Happy. Oh, sorry.
Upset.
Joy.
Upset.
Sad. Joyful.
Melancholic.
I got joyful. What'd you say, Barbara?
Melancholic.
Mhm.
Melancholy. Okay.
Um,
Oh, spelling test here.
let's see.
Oh man, that's
Depressed.
yeah.
Hopeless. Not sure that's emotion. Emotion.
I'm putting it anyways.
Yeah.
Is hopeful an emotion?
It's the opposite of hopeless, so we'll go with it.
um,
Anxious. Bored.
Mm-hmm. Grateful. Smith. Stuff. What is it?
It's not as easy as you would think.
Mm-hmm.
I know this is hard. It's tired. I'm tired. Tired. Tired is not an emotion.
Oh man. Like usually extreme. Angry, sad.
Disappointed.
What,
Yeah.
what all we got? What all you got so far?
So we have on the positive side, at least what I wrote down, and please anybody correct me if I'm wrong. Happy, excited, joyful, hopeful, grateful. Negative side, sad, angry, frustrated, upset, bad, melancholy, depressed, hopeless, anxious, bored, disappointed. Disappointed.
Need more good ones.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Agreed.
How about touched?
Touch.
Yeah.
Okay.
Pride.
Pride. Okay.
Prideful.
Pride. Okay.
Content.
Okay.
Peace.
All right, you got about 30 more seconds.
Peace, content. Okay. Nice. Nice. Nice.
You love. Your love.
Yeah, I guess that's
Yeah.
it. Yeah, that's
Love.
love. Yeah.
Lonely.
Lonely. Okay. Ooh.
Lost.
Okay,
Miserable.
there you go. Okay, so I know we got one more person popping in real quick. So what I want you to do is I want you to sit on this for just a couple minutes. We're about halfway through. So I would like you to take a couple minutes, upwards of 5 minutes, go stand up, stretch, get a drink, whatever it is you need to do, but actually get up and move around, do some stretching, something like that, get a drink. Hey, nice cup.
That's funny. We have the same one.
But yeah, take about 5 minutes, and then we're going to come back and we're going to talk about this. So while you're taking a break, think a little bit more about what you guys just did and why I would have you do this. Okay? Come back in 5 minutes. And there's Eric.
I sent him an invite on Facebook Messenger.
He didn't get the first one?
I'm pretty sure he did if I got it.
Thanks for showing up late, Eric.
Let me guess. TBI.
That's all right. He came in at a good time. We're on break.
Yeah. I was just playing all along. We better get extra credit.
Matt.
He's on break. Oh, there he is.
Hi.
Hey, what up?
What up?
Eric's trying.
Why you bugging me during my break?
Because that's how I roll.
I know, I like it. Hey, I'm pretty sure I know the answer to why you did this exercise. I'm pretty sure I've done it before.
I think so. Actually, I think I did it with you guys.
Yeah. I've had it a couple of different times from going through different classes. It's a good exercise because you're like, wow, it's true,
Well, and I like this discussion because when you get into like emotional discussions that people don't want to have, this is the logical, it makes it a logical process. So emotional control isn't a fluffy conversation now. Emotional control is a logical sequence.
Mm-hmm.
So it makes more sense that way.
Yeah, I agree.
I think Eric's calling in on another line. Now we look like the Brady Bunch.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, who's that guy?
Now it's working. Son of a bitch.
Language.
Sorry.
So
Dude, I just got home.
Is that other one not you?
No, so I can't hear you when I had to dial in so I can hear you. Because I could get in, but I can't hear you.
Okay. Well, take your
So
time. We're on break.
I got the video up and I'm looking now, so I can look and see and hear, so we're good.
Okay.
And I'm sorry, bro, I got stuck at work.
That's all right. We're about halfway. We just took a quick break, give everybody a chance to stretch and grab a drink or whatever.
That's what happens when you show up to work late.
I was at work at 6:30 this morning, sir.
Oh, that was yesterday. You were late. You were making up for it, huh?
Yeah, exactly.
I trained you well.
I hate you. I need this right now. I need some resiliency so I don't kill Matt.
Bro, Eric.
What?
I just received my second bottle of bourbon in the mail.
Did you?
Yeah. That thing's legit, dude.
I need to sign up.
You do.
How do I do that?
Just go to my Facebook page. You got to copy and paste what I put.
Okay. Oh, dude, I can't do that.
Why?
Because I can't do things like that because of my clearance.
Yeah, you can. I got a TS. What are you talking about?
Yeah, you're not supposed to.
You're not supposed to receive gifts of alcohol? Then send me all the alcohol that I left at your house.
Bro, when they read me in, they say, because, like they got those fairy dusters or whatever where they drop off booze at your house. They're like, yeah, you can't do that.
They sound amazing.
All right, I'm going to mute my microphone.
These fairy dusters, do they have a website I can sign up?
It's a Facebook page. Well, the Colorado Springs one was a Facebook page.
All right. So we got Alejandra, I got Barbara, I got Brian, got Matt, got Eric. Is Jeff still in here? I don't know. I think Jeff dropped out. Okay, that's right. If he pops back in, we'll let him in. We'll get going. Okay. So we got about 45 minutes. I want to knock some of this stuff out, and we may not go the full 45 minutes, but I want to give you guys the good information. So what we just did had you guys write down as many emotions as you can and divided them between positive and negative. So what'd you learn? What'd you come up with? Brian, you got the man. You're the man with the pen.
Yeah. So we had, split up between two sides, positive and negative. On the positive side, we had happy, excited, joyful, hopeful, grateful, touched, pride, peace, content, love. Negative side, we had sad, angry, frustrated, upset, melancholy, depressed, hopeless, anxious, bored, disappointed, lonely, lost, miserable.
Ooh, okay.
We kind of talked about how, well, we had more negative emotions than positive, and it was a little bit difficult to even come up with some of those, and maybe even more difficult coming up with those positive ones.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's usually one of the first things that comes out is when I just cut people loose, and this is usually the right group. Even in larger groups, I'll divide people into groups of five or six. So it's not like you guys, you weren't doing out of the ordinary. Most of the time, one of the first things that comes up is people talk about how easy it is to talk about the negative emotion.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
That is actually a natural defensive mechanism in the human brain, because going back all the way back to prehistoric caveman days, coming out of the cave, you got Og with his stick who's looking for the saber-toothed tiger, right? And we know up until this point, even though we live in a relatively safe environment, the human brain has not evolved much. And so the human brain still wants to look for danger. And aside from looking left and right as I cross the street so I don't get hit by a car, what is the real danger that we're facing? Not very much. But your brain still wants to look for it. And if your brain can't find danger, it's still going to find negativity. It's going to find drama. It's going to find gossip. It's going to focus on those things that drive you crazy. That's the natural mechanism. And it takes effort. Going back to, we talked a whole bunch about your brain wants to take shortcuts. You have to fight against that. And in order to do that, you have to train the skill of gratitude. Anybody ever considered gratitude as a skill? Most people don't. But gratitude is actually a skill. And the way that you practice the skill is to actually look for good things. And we'll talk about that when we get to the attention portion of it. What else did you come up with? What else did you talk about? What are your thoughts behind why would I have you do this drill? Why would I have you list a whole bunch of emotions, positive or negative?
To show us how just how negative we are. Like instantly, we just go straight to the negative aspects of it.
Yeah. Did you have any words that were similar?
Depressed and lonely.
Okay.
Yeah, I would say that. Yeah, as I looked through there, I was trying to figure that out. But yeah, I'd say that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty close. What about sorry, I'm redoing Jeff's name because Jeff's not Leah. What about, okay, so let's use the example, furious and mad. What's the difference between furious and mad?
Maybe furious is just a little bit more mad, or
A little bit more mad?
Yeah.
Like mad times two?
Yeah.
The intensity.
What's that?
It's the intensity.
Ah, there you go. So we're talking about why do we have why do we encourage people to have a big vocabulary, right? I used to tell my kids when they were younger, don't let your emotions be defined by the 7 dwarves, right? You need to have more emotions. It's important. It's furious and mad. The difference between furious and mad is intensity. Good point. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Having understanding your vocabulary and emotional vocabulary. Man, I can't talk. Having a large emotional vocabulary is a very good self-awareness tool, not only for yourself, but also for other people. Because what happy means to you may not be what happy means to somebody else, or what sad or depressed or rage means to you is going to mean something different to other people. So having a wide vocabulary of emotions helps you with your self-awareness, and helps your empathy towards other people. With empathy helps you build connection. What about mixing up emotions? We talked in the ATC model, you have events, you have thoughts, and you have emotions. Don't confuse them. And I heard Alejandro, you had said at one point, I don't think that's an emotion. And that's an important thing to consider, because there's a lot of times you might hear somebody say, well, I feel like an idiot. No, you either are or you are not. It's nothing about feeling dumb. Like, you either are or you are not, right? And that sounds kind of harsh. It's a little bit of a joke, but you got to make sure that you're not confusing your thoughts and your emotions. Don't mix them up. Your thoughts drive your emotions. You don't feel something that you think. You think it, and then you feel it. So make sure you don't let things, don't let those things be confused. What also identifying appropriate emotions. So we talked about intensity. What about differences between, let's say, guilt and shame? That's one of my favorite ones to talk about. What's the difference between guilt and shame?
I would say that the guilt is more objective and shame is that self-reflectional feeling.
Okay. I see where you're going with that. So
guilt is going to be.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say that in the way that I like to look at it is, guilt is judgment on the action. I feel guilty because I did something wrong. Shame is judgment on character. I did something wrong because I'm a bad person. That's very, very important, because even if you call it guilt, but your actions or your behaviors reflect shame, essentially you're putting yourself down, and that's hard to come back from. If you feel guilty because you did something wrong, well, that means you've learned a lesson, and that's okay as long as you learn that lesson and you move on. But to say I feel that I feel shame, it's character assassination. You're not giving yourself anywhere to go. You're just saying I'm a bad person, and that's not helpful. So be careful with certain words. What about nervous versus excited? What's the difference between being nervous and being excited?
I would say. Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead. You can go ahead, Brian.
Okay. Okay. No, I was just gonna say, real briefly, I would say the perception.
Okay. Meaning what?
Yeah. Nervous versus excited. Perception of if it's something that you perceive as bad or a threat, it'd probably be nervous, or excited being something you perceive as enjoyable, or I'll just stop there. Something enjoyable, excitement,
Okay.
Something as a threat, challenge, nervous.
All right. I see where you're going with this. So there's a couple things. One, Simon Sinek did a talk on this. And the example that he used, he was watching one of the Olympics, and he was getting really irritated because every single time after an Olympian had won an event, a reporter came up, shoved a microphone in their face, and said, it doesn't matter. It was this, all the reporters did it. And it was every single time they asked the same question eventually: were you nervous? And every single champion had the same response: no, I was excited. So what's the difference? Why would a reporter ask if they were nervous, but a champion say, no, I was excited?
I think
When you're
because
excited, go ahead.
I think because being excited shows that you're prepared, and the word were you nervous? Well, no, I'm not nervous because I'm prepared. So I think maybe that's why the answer, no, I'm excited.
All right. What are your thoughts, Eric?
Similar to hers, I was just going to say that when you're excited, you're looking forward to it. Versus nervous, you don't know what the outcome might be.
Okay. So what are some physical responses to being excited?
You smile a lot.
Okay.
Butterflies.
Butterflies.
You're
excited.
giddy.
Yeah. Your heart's racing. Probably tense, maybe sweating a little bit. What are some physical responses to being nervous? Probably a little giddy, some butterflies, my heart's racing. I might even smile to deflect, right? It's the exact same thing, except your mindset, how you approach it. If you are nervous, you're focused on things you can't control. If you are excited, you're focused on things you can control. But it's the physical response is exactly the same. It's all in your mind and how you're approaching and your attitude. So there's significant, and nervous and excited is just one example of that. So all these different, this large conversation that we're having is a long-winded way of saying you need to have a large emotional vocabulary so that you can understand how you feel and why. You can better understand how other people feel and why for emotion or for empathy and connection. You can also understand intensity and the differences and why things are the way that they are. This is a self-awareness tool. So going back to the ATC model, I'm going to pop this back up on the screen. PowerPoint. There we go. Okay. So we talk about you have an event, you have a thought, you have an emotional response, or you have emotions and you have physical responses. If you're not careful, so using this example, you're in an argument with someone you care about and you think they never listen to what I have to say, and suddenly you're irritated, and you're angry, and you're stressed, and you're yelling. If you're not aware that how this model works and the effect that your self-talk has on your emotions and your physical reactions will become the new trigger. So imagine being in an argument with someone that you care about, not just anybody, somebody you really care about. And you're in an argument and you're thinking they never listen to what I have to say. You become irritated, angry. Now you're tense and you're yelling. So now being irritated, angry, tense, and yelling is now a new trigger. What might you say next? Maybe something along the lines of, I got to win this fight. I got to prove my point. I'm going to talk louder because talking louder always works, right? Like that is so counterproductive to what you're trying to achieve, because what are you actually trying to achieve here? You're in an argument with somebody you care about. If you care about them, I would assume the point is to get to a logical resolution that's good for both people. It's not about winning the argument. It's about ending the argument in the best way possible. So the point of this is to always have your eye on what is the result that you're looking for. Emotions are the result. So when we talk about emotional control, we're talking about self-talk control of your thoughts. Because if your thoughts drive your emotions and emotions are the result, then whether I'm preparing for a test, I find myself in an argument, I find myself in thick traffic, I'm having a tough day and I'm frustrated, right? The emotion is the result. You need to slow down the process, because we talked about heat of the moment. Somebody cuts me off in traffic, I instantly have a thought, and then I instantly have an emotional response. I need to be able to slow that process down. Separate the event from the thought, from the emotion. You have control over your self-talk. And self-talk drives your emotions and your physical reactions. Think about athletics. When I say pregame, what do you think of?
Warming up.
Okay.
Preparing.
Preparing for an event. What do?
You train.
Okay. I'm talking like 30 minutes before a game. or an event?
Stretch.
Stretch.
You go through the motions.
Okay. So you're physically getting ready. You're putting yourself into an effective mental state, and you're trying to drive the emotions that you want to feel. You know, some people play angry, and it works for them. Some people play relaxed, and it works for them. You have to know what you're looking for. So self-awareness, the self-awareness is, what are your tendencies? What are your triggers? What are your sensory cues, so that you can understand what are the things that tip you off in a counterproductive way? What are the things that put you in a productive state, so that you can better utilize the things that are productive, and you can counteract or reprogram counterproductive habits. But until you're aware of them, you're never going to be able to do anything about it. And then once you are aware of it, you have to practice it, because we don't rise to the occasion. We fall to our level of training. If you have a bad day, you're going to fall back on your habits. So you have to practice this stuff. Okay, last thing. The most successful people I know have a tendency to say, that happened, now what? They don't let events get in their way. Events happen. We act and we react a lot. It's being proactive. Okay, so we talked a lot about self-talk. The other half of control, we're going to talk about breathing. Breathing is one of those automatic responses we talked about earlier. No one had to teach you how to breathe. You just started doing it one day, and you haven't stopped since. Unless you actively, you almost have to physically try to not breathe in order to stop breathing. Like it's that strong of an automatic response. But it can be consciously controlled to enhance your mental and your physical performance. So rule of threes, general rule of threes in survival: 3 weeks without food, 3 days without water, 3 hours without shelter in extreme circumstances, and 3 minutes without breath. So it's pretty significant. Breath is important. Okay. And here's your obligatory coronavirus joke about hard breathing. But when we talk about the importance of breath, it's an automatic process that we are 100% dependent upon. Becoming more deliberate, so moving from default to deliberate, is going to have dramatic effects. So sit comfortably for a second, for a minute, and don't change anything about how you've been breathing. And just be aware. If you're like me, without thinking much about it, you're probably pretty shallow breathing. You're not really expanding your chest. You're not doing these big belly breaths that a lot of people do in yoga and meditation and mindfulness. You're probably just kind of sitting here. Shoulders are a little bit loose. And you're probably shallow breathing. There's not necessarily anything wrong with that. That's your automatic response. But think about this. Chances are you're probably breathing with the upper half of your lungs, because those expand pretty simply, right? In order to take a really deep inhale, I got to open up my belly and I got to do all this stuff, right? If I shallow breathe, I'm using the top third of my lungs. The top third of my lungs are where most of the nerve endings associated with the sympathetic nervous system are located. And going back to what we talked about earlier, the sympathetic nervous system is your pick-me-up. It's your fight or flight response. It's your amygdala that's firing as a trigger, right? So even if you're not stressed, shallow breathing is putting you into that stressful response. You're preparing for something, all right? Now take a really deep breath. And then I want you to exhale twice the amount of time that your inhale. So really extend the exhale. Take a deep breath and then extend the exhale. As far as you can, keep exhaling. You got extra breath in there, keep pushing it out. And then what do you notice? It's an instant trigger to take another deep breath. So not only is that really good for deep breathing, right? really expanding the chest cavity, expand the belly, push that diaphragm all the way down, taking as much as you can. Not only does it feel good, but it makes sense because the bottom 2/3 of our lungs are where most of the nerve endings are that activate the parasympathetic nervous system. Parasympathetic, remember parachute, slows you down. That's your rest and digest. That's your mindfulness. That's your meditation. That's your attention and your focus. So taking a deep breath is more than just feeling good. It feels good because you're engaging the parasympathetic nervous system and you're encouraging your body to slow down by taking that deep breath. So I want to talk real quick about a couple breathing techniques. We're going to talk about 3. There's a lot of them out there, but 3 really, really basic ones. Slow down breath. We just did it. Take a really big inhale and extend the exhale. By extending the exhale, you're pushing everything out of your body and you're encouraging a deep inhale, which is activating the parasympathetic nervous system. Okay? It's deliberate. You are taking conscious control of an automatic system so that you can perform more optimally. Now, the next one, steady breath. Talked about this also. You have a tendency to shallow breathe. Try at periodic times throughout your day is when you're shallow breathing, just inhale for a couple more seconds. Exhale for a couple more seconds. It doesn't have to be dramatic. And the great thing about both the steady breath and the slow down breath is you can do this anywhere. You can be in a board meeting, you can be driving in your car, you can be in a conversation with somebody face to face, and they won't even know that you're using breathing techniques. It's that simple. You just got to be aware. It's just routine awareness of your breath. And then finally, we all need to pick me up from time to time. The trick, if you want to perform optimally, is to see how much you can pull from your internal rather than relying on some type of external stimulant. Whether you're talking about drugs, alcohol, smoking, Monster, Red Bull, right? Coffee. It can be a quick pick-me-up, but what if I teach you a technique that'll take you less than 10 seconds and it'll give you that pickup that you need? It's a speed-up breath. So a speed-up breath is you will, again, inhale as far as you can, and then when you exhale, it's going to be a short in, short out, repeated over and over again. And it's just that, speed-up breath. 10 to 15 seconds. In fact, you don't really want to go more than 20 seconds because you're probably going to start hyperventilating. I don't want you to pass out, right? Neil told me to do this and I hit my head. Don't do that. You're talking like 10 to 15 seconds. It's just really deep inhale and then quick in and out. Again, you're using shallow breathing and you're activating the nerves for the sympathetic nervous system, which is speeding you up. So next time you're feeling a little bit tired, just try a pick-me-up breath technique. But again, people don't even have to know that you're doing this stuff. Okay, so we went through awareness. We went through control. We're going to head in. We're going to talk a little bit about attention. But first, I wanted to ask, is there any questions, comments, ideas? Where do you see this being effective for you? How do you see yourself using this? What are your thoughts?
I personally like to breathe when I'm very anxious, just to kind of reset. But I like these breathing techniques because they're, especially that pick-me-up one. I've never heard of that one.
Yeah, it's a little. There's a ton of them out there. If you just like Google breathing techniques, and there's like you can find 20 or 30 in just a couple minutes. But some of the simplest ones are the most effective because they are just so simple. When I first started getting into performance psychology, I thought a lot about what are the effects of self-talk, and emotional control is really, really important, and it still is. But there's a physical component to breathing that has such a massive effect on your nervous system. And we've only scratched the surface on a lot of the things that I can talk about when it comes to how you can deliberately control automatic systems in your body, and breathing is one of those. We talked about heart rate and blood pressure, how those things can be manipulated by using breath, or by using your either by using breath or by using some of the other techniques. But breath is so powerful, and it's so easy. You're already doing it. I don't even have to teach you, right? It's so easy. Matt does this when he's sleeping. Get it? Sorry. Okay. So I'm going to pop this back up. We're going to finish this strong. And there we go. All right. So back to talking about science of optimal performance. We're going to talk about attention. And the two simplest things that I like to talk about when it comes to attention, again, simple, very, very powerful, is gratitude and simulation. So gratitude. What do you think of when I say gratitude?
Appreciation.
Okay. Appreciation. What else? A lot of people say thankfulness. Sorry, Barbara, what were you going to say?
Something that has a meaning for me and in my life.
Okay. There you go. Good. And a lot of people I talk to, the first thing that they'll say is being thankful. And I'm glad that you said the things that you did, because showing appreciation or being appreciative of something, or having something that's meaningful to you, that's going to that next level. You're not just thankful. You're actively being appreciative and showing appreciation for the things that are happening in your life. And we talked earlier about the negativity bias. This is the skill that you use. And again, gratitude is not just, I'm really happy that happened. No, why? Why are you happy? What does it mean to you? So on pages 13 and 14 of the workbook, I actually provide you the questions to ask yourself in a space like a journal. It doesn't have to be a journal. I used to do this with Post-it notes. I'd show up to work, and the first thing that I did was I grabbed a sticky note. And sticky notes that big, I don't have a lot of room, so I'm not writing paragraphs. I'm just writing 3 things from the last 24 hours that were really meaningful. 3 good things. And I'd stick it up on the wall, and then I'd just take 2 minutes to do some self-talk and some reflection of why this good thing happened, what this good thing means, what ways I or others contributed to it, and what can I do tomorrow to enable more of it to happen. And by doing that, you're reflecting and you're building the positive emotion from that. You're showing appreciation, and you're training your brain to look for good things instead of bad things. And what they found with this, they actually did a study at University of Pennsylvania. What they found is you're training yourself. So not only are you observe good things, but you're by the end of the 30 days, rather than having to reflect, you will train yourself to walk throughout your day, and you'll actively observe. So by the time you get to the end of the day, you've already got 30, 40 things that you've shown appreciation for, because you actively observed them throughout the day. So, but again, this is a skill. Gratitude is a skill. You have to practice it. If you don't do it very often, it's not going to be a habit of yours. And we know habits are easy to fall back on. So practice good habits, productive habits. 3 good things in the last 24 hours. 24 hours is important, because it's not about what happened 2 months ago. Recent. What happened recently that you're very, very thankful for? Okay. Final thing that we're going to talk about today is simulation. What do you think about when I say simulation? It's the first thing that pops into your mind.
Fake.
Fake? Okay. It's actually good. I like that.
Preparing.
Okay. Yeah.
Preparing. Okay. So I like to use simulation as opposed to, say, visualization. So what we're talking about here is mental representation of all 5 of your senses. And earlier we talked about your brain can't tell the difference between real and make-believe, right? Real and perceived threat. Well, your brain also can't tell the difference between real and perceived success. So if you want to accomplish something, the best way to accomplish it is to completely immerse yourself in that situation before it even happens. So again, visualization, people use that a lot in sport. Visualize yourself doing it. Okay, that's great. But what about, what are you hearing? What do you smell? What do you feel? You know, if I'm going to get up and I'm going to speak in front of a crowd, I want to hear. What am I going to hear? Are they going to applaud? Are they going to, you know, give a brief introduction and then I'm going to get a light applause from the crowd? I want to hear that. I want to know what that's going to hear like, or I'm going to walk up onto the stage and it's going to be crickets. Nobody's going to, is that going to throw me off? No, because I've already practiced it. Walking up on stage in front of a crowd that's completely disengaged, because I've been there and it's really uncomfortable. So I have to practice doing that in my own mind. So you are completely immersing yourself. And I like that Eric threw out fake, because it is. I'm immersing myself in something that hasn't happened yet in anticipation of it possibly happening. So Matt, security forces, I know Eric, previous security forces, have you guys ever put yourself in a scenario of, you know, at the range pulling your weapon without actually pulling your weapon? Have you put yourself in that scenario before you actually do it?
100 times.
I think we've all done it at the range, but I mean, I catch myself doing it when I go into a restaurant. I just went out to lunch with my brother and a friend today, and sure enough, I was looking at the exits. You know, I'm simulating, like, if something bad happens in here, how am I going to get out? What are my exit points? How am I going to react if this situation happens? I think it's ingrained in us, and you know, that's how you get better. So if something does happen, you're like, okay, I know exactly how to react. It's muscle memory at that point.
You ever had a bad day and tried to imagine what it was going to be like coming home and practicing overcoming your bad day? You ever try to do that? Try it sometime. You know, you're driving home and you're imagining pulling into the driveway, walking in the house, and what happens? What do you want to happen? So again, going back to the ATC model, what's the outcome that you want? Because that's what performance psychology is all about. That's what resilience is all about. What's the outcome that I want to achieve? If I have a better idea of what I want to achieve, it's more likely to happen. Otherwise, if I don't have a picture of what I want to happen, something's going to happen. How much control am I going to have over it? I need to be proactive. That's the idea behind simulation. The brain can't tell the difference between reality and imagination. So use that to your advantage. Have you ever found yourself watching somebody do something and then imagining yourself doing that same thing? It's called modeling. And there's covert modeling and there's overt modeling. You know, I've had this conversation with people in the military before about mentorship relationships. Have you ever had a conversation with somebody that you considered a mentor? If you didn't, you should. You should go up to that person and say, I respect you and I like what you've done and I want to do what you do. Will you be my mentor? That's a conversation that you need to have, because if not, they don't realize. You can still model and there's still benefit to that. You just got to realize, how proactive do you want to be? So you can model somebody else. They did this as there was a group of college students and they showed them video of professional golfers. And then they took him out to the range and they hit really, really well after never playing, just by modeling behavior that they saw on a video. And there might have been a little instruction, but they didn't actually show them anything. It was all just on the screen. You can learn from modeling, but that's also a good lesson that people are always watching you. So watch and observe, model a skilled person. Does anybody ever think back on peak performances that they've ever had? You think back on, here's a time that I did it really, really well. And then you stop and you think and you visualize, what was I doing? What did I do so well? What did it feel like? What did I do? All right. It's the idea of a victory log, or peak, they call it peak experience. It's going back to something that you've accomplished before. And even just talking about that, I can feel butterflies because I got a couple images of some peak experiences that I've had. And just having that feeling of, wow, that was amazing. Like I was on point and I did everything right. And they've actually shown this with a certain amount of success where they'll videotape. So take an example of a young boy learning to ride a bicycle. And he's all frustrated and he's all mad. And you know that he can do it, but something he's freaking himself out. So what they do is they videotape. And they start all the way to the right and they videotape. And he pedals a couple times and then falls down. And they don't stop the camera. Get him up, pedal, fall down, pedals, fall down. Then they take the video and they splice out everything except him pedaling. And it's very clearly different videos spliced together. But all the little boy sees is him pedaling and not falling down. After watching the video, he went out onto his bike and rode without falling down. Just by watching a video of him doing the right thing with all the wrong things spliced out. That's peak performance. So whether you're watching somebody else modeling or you're imagining a peak performance that you've had in the past, and it's not only, don't always have to be sport. It could be business, it could be a conversation. Remember, when we talk about resilience and performance, I'm even talking about relationships and parenting. What are some great days that you've had with your significant other or your kids? Replicate those. Think about it. Simulation. Remember what it was like, and then replicate it over and over again. Using your sensory cues, your smell, your sight, your touch, your hearing. So practicing these state changes are going to have real world effects. Optimal performance depends upon your breathing, your attention, your simulation, your energy, your recovery, all these different zones you can find yourself in. I've heard a lot of people talk about it being in flow. What's the state that you want to accomplish, and what's the state that you will be in when you have that ideal performance? Okay, last couple things I'm going to talk about. Number one is called rescripting. Rescripting is the idea of replaying a bad event in your mind, but changing it so that you get the proper function, process, action, the proper result. You know, you ever had that thought of, oh man, if I would have just had this one smart aleck comment, I'd have shown them. Take a bad situation and replay it in your mind. Recreate it into a good situation. So remember, your brain is always mapping. Everything that you do, you get better at. And if your brain can't tell the difference between reality and fantasy, then create the fantasy of what you want to accomplish. And that's what your brain will remember. Rescript bad situations. Rescript something where you didn't do quite so well. And recreate the model so your mind knows what to do. Event resolution is, maybe you had an argument that ended abruptly. Any event of any kind, you know, it could have even been a death of someone that maybe you feel, I just didn't have the chance to say what I wanted to say. Then say it. Allow yourself to resolve the event. Close your mind and have a conversation with the person that you're missing, that you'll probably never be able to talk to again. But in your mind, you will have had that conversation and you'll say everything that you wanted to say. Event resolution is very powerful. If you have something that's hanging out there that's bothering you, you can resolve it. And then the last thing is resource simulation. This is essentially just your happy place. What's the place, if you were to close your eyes, where would you go to feel relaxed, to feel grounded, to feel chill, or the opposite of that? Where would you go to get excited before an event? What's the end result that you want? What's the place that you can go? You can close your eyes, you can take a couple deep breaths. Where's the place that you can go to put yourself in the proper mental, emotional, and physical state so that you can accomplish what you need to accomplish, whether that's slow down or speed up? Focus, mindfulness. That is resource simulation. And give yourself permission. Sometimes you just need, sometimes it really just comes down to you got to give yourself permission. Give yourself permission to be sad and call yourself out. You know, going back to name it and tame it. If you feel an emotion and you say the emotion that you're feeling, you are more likely to be able to handle the situation logically. So give yourself permission. So awareness, control, attention. This is the way that I format resilience and performance. Awareness for stress, brain-body connection. We talked a lot of really technical terms and sciencey terms, but it's really important when you talk about the trigger responses, the emotional responses. Why do you feel the way that you feel? I'm not a clinical psychologist. I'm not going to go into your past. But what I'm going to ask you to do is be more aware of yourself. What are the triggered responses that you're having and why? And what can you do about it from this point forward? Because you can't change anything that happened in the past, but you are absolutely in control of your self-talk right now. So take control of that. Self-talk leads to emotional control. Breathing has dramatic mental, emotional, and physical reactions. And then finally, in your attention, where are you throwing your gratitude out? Or are you going to forget about gratitude and keep falling victim to negativity? Simulation is powerful. It might be fake, but your mind doesn't know the difference. So that's all I got for you. We are just a little bit early, not much, a little bit. So in the chat, let me stop this. I'm going to drop this survey because I'd like you guys' feedback. It's a little bit longer than I would like, but a lot of it has to do with me and my presentation and the content and the format. And like, it's got a lot of those kind of conversation, those questions. It's not necessarily you and reflective and it's going to be a lot about the material. So I'd really appreciate your feedback. If you have some, there's a mix of sliding scale and short answers. So what are you guys' thoughts? So we talked about awareness, control, and attention. What are your thoughts?
I think there's a lot that I'm gonna start using in my everyday work life and personal life, because there's a lot of times where we work long hours. You come home and you're expecting something, and you come in and you bring your work into the household, and I need to work on doing that. So I'll probably maybe just sit out in the driveway and visualize what I want the inside to be like, and kind of put that into motion. So I think that'll be really good. Like, for instance, I came home tonight and my house is a mess. So I'm going to visualize my kids cleaning it up when I get off of this call.
Nice. I like it. Well, and that's tough. I mean, because everybody faces situations different. And so this isn't, something where I'm going to sit down and say, here's what you do and here's how you do it. No, it's being aware is the first step, because you can't regulate what you're not aware of. So how do these things impact you, and being aware of your high stress job and how you bring that home, or how do you avoid bringing it home, is going to be really important. So Alejandra and I we've actually been talking a lot about working with, she works with Rise, back in Omaha. Rise is a nonprofit that works with the prison system, and they actually they teach a program for incarcerated felons, and then they work with them through release into a mentorship program that helps them transition and tries to reduce the amount of recidivism. I think I said that right, of repeat offenders, essentially. So her and I are going to hopefully start working together and try to roll some resilience into the RISE program. So I'm really excited about that.
I'm looking
Yeah.
forward to it.
Yeah,
This
I'm pretty
is
excited.
great. Me too.
Yeah. But yeah, I appreciate you guys being here. I don't want to keep you any longer than we need to, but I'm here to chat and listen to you guys' feedback. If you have any, if you want to just provide it on the link, that'd be really cool. Matt, I know you were, or Eric, I know you're working. I appreciate you popping in when you could and be here. So whatever feedback you have, I'd appreciate. But that's all I got. Unless you guys have any last second thoughts. What you got, Brian?
No, nothing at the moment, Neil. I'll drop a good bit of feedback there in that link there.
Right on.
But thank you for letting us come in.
Yeah, you bet, man. I'm gonna hopefully take some time off over the holidays and hit this hard in January, because between working part-time for Even Pulse and trying to do my own thing, I'm hoping to hit pretty big in 2021. It's gonna be a lot of fun. I'm gonna find Matt a job. I'm gonna make him retire and come work for me. That's awesome. All right. Well, you guys have been awesome. Thank you very much. Appreciate the interaction. Looking forward to the feedback, and I will talk to you all very soon.
Hey, thanks, brother. Sorry I was late again.
It's all right, brother. Thanks for popping in. Talk to you
We
soon.
expected that.